Parthaya Pradibodhidam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gradhidam Puranamunina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaidam Radavarshinim Bhagavadim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusantadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marudastunandi Divaistavaihi Vedai Sangapadakramopaniषदे Gayantiyam Samagaha Dhyanavasthita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyandiyam Yogino Yasyandam Navidusura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha. So we are discussing the 15th verse of the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And I think I mentioned this earlier, that the 15th chapter tells us that the infinite Lord is immanent, is present in everything in this world, in everyone. So essentially this chapter discusses this idea of the immanence, the transcendence, and also the omnipresence of the absolute reality. So in some ways you find it bears comparison with Eckhart's concept of the Supreme Being, which transcends all kinds of verbalization, which we will discuss very soon in the commentary. Shankaracharya says so. The idea that the absolute reality cannot be defined or described except as the totality of all existence, which is again beyond verbalization, beyond definition, beyond description. Sarvasya chaham kriti sannivishto mattas mridhyajnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvaihi ahameva vedyo vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. This is the 15th verse. So, I am present in everything, and I am the source of all knowledge, all understanding, all memory, and all forgetfulness. So, mattas mudijnanam apohanam. So, from me alone, all knowledge arises. So, we have to understand in this context, in this 15th chapter, Lord Krishna uses the word I, the first person. It doesn't mean an anthropomorphic personal God. What he's talking about is one supreme reality, which is the nature of a divine principle, which is present in everyone and in everything. So the immanence, and through immanence, omnipresence. It is present everywhere because it is present in everything. So that is the idea behind us. So this chapter is very important here. And I am the one who is discussed, who is described, who is defined, who is explored in all world scriptures. So, it doesn't mean that that finite form of Krishna, the monotheistic Godhead, is the subject of discussion in Bible or in the Dhammapada or elsewhere. What it means is, this supreme principle, this all-pervading supreme principle is the central theme of all discussions in all traditional religious philosophical scriptures. It may be called by different names in different traditions, different books, depending upon the socio-cultural anthropological conditions in which the particular scripture comes into existence. But wherever there is an exploration and investigation into the transcendental truth, the infinite truth, that is nothing but I myself. So you can find the word I is used. Often when you read the translations, this could be misunderstood frequently. So actually this should never be interpreted in terms of monotheistic ideas. It should be interpreted only in monistic or Advaitic ideas, otherwise it won't make any sense. If somebody tells you Lord Krishna is being discussed in the Bible, I don't think the Christians will be amazed, will be amused, will be happy about it. Or in any other scripture. But suppose you mention that it is the supreme reality, the divine principle, the transcendental omnipresent reality that is being discussed, the central theme of discussion in all books, then it's perfectly logical. That's why Vedaisha Sarvaihi Agameva Vedya means I am the one to be known. I mean, I am the supreme reality that is being discussed, that is being explored, that is sought after in all scriptures, in all traditions. So Veda, the word Veda is used here. Veda doesn't mean necessarily a particular scriptural tradition of Hinduism. It means any spiritual knowledge which represents a search into truth, into knowledge, into supreme knowledge. That's the meaning of the word Veda. It comes from the Vedic root Vid, which actually means supreme knowledge. Not knowledge in the sense of intellectual understanding, but rather knowledge in the sense of spiritual realization. So that is the important point that we find it here in the 15th verse of the 15th chapter. And then the 16th verse, Dvavimo Purusho Loke Ksharascha Akshara Evacha Kshara Sarvani Bhudani Kudasthaha Akshara Uchyate. So this is the 16th verse. What it essentially tells you is this. Now you find here, there are two beings, the literal translation. But literal translation also needs a lot of explanation. The literal translation tells you that there are two beings, two realities in this world. One is perishable, the finite, is called Ksharah. The other is imperishable or infinite, it's called Aksharah. Now what is perishable, this phenomenal world? Trees and mountains and valleys, oceans, clouds, all these constitutes this empirical phenomenal universe, which is always changing, which comes into existence maybe billions of years ago, may exist for some millions of years and then disappear. That's one meaning. That is called Trigala Badhita, means that which is beyond time. Trigala Badhita means that is within time. So anything which is within time. This earth is within time. The universe is within time. Everything in this world is within time. So, and all these undergo changes. So change is always an indication of finitude, or it is not absolutely real because it doesn't remain the same all the time, but it's not absolutely unreal either because it is there before us. So it's changing all the time, it's a relativity. And that is Ksharah. That's idea. Perishable. Perishable, everything that you see. Then imperishable. Imperishable is a technical word meaning to be understood here. The consciousness, the Atman, is present in all these beings. So the consciousness dimension of everything, including our own physical bodies, is imperishable. But the material dimension of our personality is perishable, which is Ksharah. So from Vedantic perspective, our body, mind and all other paraphernalia, body, mind complex as we call it, and these trees and mountains, they belong to the same category because they disappear. They come into existence at some point of time in the past, exist, maybe an amoeba or an insect may live for a very short time, maybe the galaxies and stars may live for billions of years and millions of years. But still they come into existence, so they are perishable. They are only relatively real, not absolutely real. That is Ksharah. But within all these, there is an imperishable reality, and that is Aksharah. So in all of us, it is there. When a human body is pushed the tube, before that it becomes just a matter. But Vedanta tells you that there is something within the human body that is imperishable, that takes birth again, assuming new tendencies, impressions, and vasanas and samskaras, and again this life continues. So that part of, that dimension of the human personality is imperishable. So this is Ksharam and Aksharam. So Akshara means all human beings. It's called Kudastha. So you can find here, Kshara Sarvani Bhudani Kudastho Kshara Uchyade. This word is very important. Kuda actually means anvil. So anvil, maybe a blacksmith may use an anvil. He will use it for making different things from metal, maybe gold or iron or whatever it is. So he needs something, ancient times, he needs some very hard, strong, unshakable, unchangeable thing, very strong. It is installed on the ground, it doesn't move. And on it he put some other material things, maybe metallic things, and he will hammer it. And he will change its shape and size and so on. So a metal piece will undergo changes. But the anvil in which the metal piece is kept and hammered, that doesn't change. So Kuda in Sanskrit means two things. It could mean deception, cheating and so on. It's a human character. But here it means the anvil. The anvil in which, on which you keep, the blacksmith may keep a piece of metal and hammer it. It doesn't change. But that metal will change. He may melt it, he may change its shape and size and so on. Like that, there is this anvil, the Kuda, the Atman. The Atman remains the same. And from birth to birth, this Atman assumes new bodies and goes through different experiences. And this life continues. But that Atman never changes. It remains the same, jivatma. That is the meaning here. So there are the dvavimo purusho loge ksharascha akshara evacha. Kshara purusha and akshara purusha. Akshara purusha is this kudastha, jiva, individual soul, which contains two dimensions. One, the imperishable Atman, and other, the changing characteristics of body, mind and intellect. You already discussed in the last session. So the idea of the law of karma, the doctrine of karma and the doctrine of reincarnation are very important in this context here. So we may change our body, but when we are born again, we are supposed to carry through the next life some subtle impressions, tendencies, memories coming from this life. We may see something with these eyes in this life, and that visual experience can create a tendency, an impression. It's called a vritti. So an experience, a karma leads to vritti, a residual effect on the mental system. And that becomes a solidified tendency called samskaras. Certain tendencies that will assert in spite of our best effort. If you go to a library and you are alone, there are different books in the library, maybe different magazines, different pictures. Nobody is watching you. So what book you select to read, that will reflect your real tendency. There may be great books, there may be books which are not so very great. Sometimes the opposite of great books you find can be toxic for the mind. There are many such books and many magazines. So what we select voluntarily when we have an option, that will in many ways show our true tendency. It's vritti, samskara. And this again leads to similar activities, and these samskaras, these impressions get accumulated in the mental system, and they are carried over from one life cycle to another life cycle. And this journey continues till we realize that we are Atman, we are not the body-mind complex which comes and goes, which is born which lives, dies, and is reborn. That's only the outer shell of our personality. When we realize this, we get freedom from this transmigratory cycle. The same way you find in Buddhism, Praditya Samutpada, you find the same thing. Buddhism also believes. Buddhism actually got this from the Gita and from other books. So, this is an important verse. Now, here Shankaracharya says something very, very, very important. He says in the Bhashya, you have to remember, why Shankara's words are important. We won't be discussing this Gita today. Bhagavad Gita would not have become a part of Hindu or Vedantic tradition if Shankaracharya had not written a commentary on it in 8th century. So the most original exposition and descriptions come from Shankaracharya's commentary. So he says, Ksharah sarvani bhudani samastam vikara jadam ityartha. So all that undergoes changes, vikara jadam, which comes into existence through change. That Ksharah, everything, the seed becomes a sprout, becomes a plant, becomes a tree. So also every moment our cells also undergo changes. Human mind is changing all the time. So all these constitute the phenomenal world, the perishable, the empirical phenomenal world. Kudastaha kudo rashi vastitaha. So kuda is, as I meant, anvil. He remains there, and you take a piece of metal, you hit it with a hammer, it changes, but kuda, the anvil, remains the same. Similarly, our tendencies and impressions will come and go, but within this body-mind complex, that Atman, jivatma is there. It never undergoes any change. Aneka maya vanchanadi pragarena sthitaha kodasthaha samsara bijanandya naksharatidi akshara uchyati. So, this external world, phenomenal world, of course, will undergo change. But at the same time, the jivatma, he never perishes. Because jivatma essentially contains the Atman, plus samskaras, vasanas, vrittis, impressions, tendencies, memories, and so on, which constitute our human life. We may hear something in this life, that experience produces an effect, is retained a mental system called antakarana, and it functions as memories, tendencies, impressions, attitudes and aptitudes. We define our way of thinking, our actions and words and lifestyle. And this is added to the accumulated tendencies coming from previous life cycles. And again, this journey continues. The journey is not a straight line. It is a kind of cyclic rotation, a wheel. A wheel, you cannot come out of the wheel. A wheel has no beginning, no end. So that is why this samsara. This concept of samsara, which is so very important in Buddhism, is just an idea that Buddhism took in its entirety from Bhagavad Gita. So that's why Bhashikara says, Aneka maya vanchanadi pragarena kudas samsara bija anantiyad. So this bija means seed. So samsara means this endless journey from birth, suffering and enjoying, and then growing older and older, dying, and again being reborn, again continuation of the journey. There's no end to this. There's an end, but you have to come out of the wheel. And coming out of the wheel means, Vivekananda calls it dehypnotization, means we are hypnotized into thinking that we are this body. So we have to dehypnotize ourselves. We have to convince ourselves that we are not this body. Atman with the body. So when this realization comes, we come out of this. Now, this is the essence of the 16th verse that we just touched in the last session. Now comes the 17th. And this is perhaps the most important, one of the 2-3 most important verses 17, 18 and 19. These are most important verses in the entire chapter. Uttama Purushastu Anyaha Paramatma iti Dakradaha Yo Lokatrayam Avishya Vibharti Avya Isharaha. This is the 17th verse. What it means is, the subject of discussion in this particular chapter is Purushottama. So it's called Purushottama Yogam. That's it. The central theme of this text is Purushottama. But so what is Purushottama? Purushottama can be roughly equated, maybe not with much justification, but somewhat, at least Rudolf Otto and others have tried to make it out that Eckhart's concept of the Supreme, the Supreme Godhead, which cannot even be called Trinity, is an approximation to what Vedanta calls Atman, Purushottama, means it is beyond Ksharah and Aksharah. So Uttama Purushastu Anyaha, the supreme divine truth, which is immanent, omnipresent and transcendental. It is distinct and different from both the empirical universe and also from the jivatma, the individual soul. Because in a way, the individual soul is the same, but not body-mind complex. So what is a jiva or individual soul? We are all of us. We are the supreme Atman expressing through this physical body, manifesting our own tendencies, impressions, samskaras, attitudes that we have accumulated through endless cycles of life, deaths and rebirths. That's all. So that Atman manifesting through this body-mind complex, and with the help of all these tendencies and impressions that we have gathered over the last several hundreds of life cycles. That's what we are. You remove that body-mind complex dimension of our personality, remove the tendencies, then the divine principle is within us. But we often delude ourselves into thinking, or we identify ourselves with our tendencies, our likes and dislikes, and then we move away from our true identity. And to get back to our true identity is to realize that we are Purushottama. So Uttama Purushastu Anyaha. Uttama Purusha, Purushottama is distinct, different from both Ksharah Purusha and Aksharah Purusha. So in a way it is true that the divine principle is present in everything. But at the same time, all that you see physically in front of us are not the absolute reality. So there is an interesting verse in another small little work we call Ashtavakra Samhita. Mai Ananda Mahabodho Jagadviji Subhavataha Udeduva Astamayadu Name Buddhir Nacha Kshatihi. So in that infinite ocean, Mahabodho means the infinite ocean, Ananda Mahabodho. The huge, vast, infinite ocean. There are so many waves, some small, some big. Without any effort, by the very nature, by virtue of the characteristics of ocean, where water is always moving, waves are coming and going. Now, in this ocean, so many waves emerge, and they emerge by their own nature, subhavataha. And they emerge and then they disappear. Udedu astamayat. This ocean is by itself is not distinct from the waves. But remember, the waves cannot exist without ocean, but ocean can exist without these huge waves. There is a 30-meter tsunami wave. It certainly cannot have any independent existence without the ocean. They emerge from the ocean, they exist, and sometimes those waves are gone in the ocean. So without ocean, these waves cannot come into existence. But without waves, ocean can exist. Without ocean, waves cannot exist, but without waves, ocean certainly can exist. It will be able to exist. So, like that, in this universe, in this infinite Brahman, all these universes, these galaxies, Milky Waves, existing for some billions of years, exist. They disappear. They disappear in the sense they become something else. Not that they completely disappear. Energy never disappears into nothingness, it changes. So the entire phenomenon of creation, its existence, and dissolution and re-emergence, all these are mentioned here in this particular well-known verse from the Ashtavakra Samhita. Mahi Ananda Mahabodhu Jagadviji Subhavataha. This world itself is a universe, it's a huge wave. And they emerge, they exist. The waves exist maybe for a few minutes, some waves. But in the context of the entire creation, the billions of years that the earth may last is just like a few minutes or a few seconds, equivalent to the duration of the wave. So, and what is this ocean here? The ocean is Purushottama, Uttama Purushaka. In that Purushottama, this external world emerges, the Ksharah Purusha and also Akshara Purusha exist, then disappear and again re-emerge. That's the idea behind. So, of course, this idea you'll find in many other books also. Srishti Nama Brahma Rupai Satchidananda Vastuni Abdo Fenadivat Nama Rupa Prasarana. So another verse is there in the smaller book of Shankaracharya. What is creation? Srishti Nama Kim. What is creation? Brahmarupe Satchidananda Vastuni Abdo means a huge ocean. What is the ocean? The ocean is it is made up of Nama and Rupa, different names and forms. The ocean by itself doesn't have name and form, but within the ocean or within the ocean, all these different names and forms come, they exist, they interchange, and they disappear, and again they re-emerge. That's the idea behind. It's a very, very famous verse. And that Purushottama is like the ocean. Again, this is a comparison, it's only an analogy. So that Purushottama, it pervades everywhere in everything. Lokatrayam avishya bibharti avesharaha. So Lokatraya, I mean, it is all pervading. So the English translation may be 3 words, but actually it refers to 3 states of human consciousness. In Sanskrit it's called Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti. Waking, dream and deep sleep stage. That's what it means here. So after all, we cannot have any experience in this world except within one of these triple levels of consciousness. Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti. Waking, dream and deep sleep. Whatever we experience. So this Purushottama is all pervading. At the same time, it is distinct and different. It is all pervading, that's omnipresent. It is immanent, at the same time it is transcendental. So that is the 17th verse. So we can find there are many comparisons here. This Purushottama, this Atman exists, manifests, lives in this world in all forms, all names and forms of different human beings, different parts of creation, everything is included in this divine principle. In other words, the creation, the phenomenal world is also not alien. The whole creation is one spiritual family. Not only human beings or animal kingdom. The entire creation is one spiritual family. That's again based on the Vedic principle, that is Rutam, Satyam and Dharma. Because if you violate Dharma, you will you'll be violating the equilibrium or the harmony of life in nature. So you pollute air and water, it will affect human life, it affects the animal kingdom, it also creates lots of problems, leads to catastrophe and so on. If you cut down trees, there will be drought, famine, climate change and so on. So the entire creation is one sacred spiritual entity, and this Purushottama is pervading everywhere. So the idea of spiritual unity and oneness of existence is implied here. You find this in many other verses, the Upanishads. Tum Stri, Tum Puman Asi, Tum Kumara Utava Kumari. That divine principle, it manifests in this world. Maybe in the form of a young boy or young girl or woman, old man walking with sticks, a man who is growing old, dying and reborn like a baby, from the state of being a baby to the state of an aged person. All these happen within this spiritual circle. A man or woman, animal or everything is part of the divine spiritual entity. That fundamental unity and oneness, spiritual unity and oneness of existence, that is implied here in this context of Purushottama. So very famous verse it is. And once we realize this truth, that the whole creation is one spiritual family, then, and not only that, when our own life is a constant journey, if we believe that we'll be traveling from birth to birth, or rather death to death, then death doesn't become a matter of concern when we understand that death is only a transition. It is like a semicolon, not a full stop. So one can live beyond the problem of being constrained by time or space or anything. One can transcend all this. That's the idea behind here. It's a very famous chapter, and this chapter is recited in some of the traditional monasteries in India at the time of having lunch, because there is a idea behind, that the same Atman, it's expressing itself in the form of Jataragni, the digestive power. I mean, eating food, cooking food, eating food, walking, talking, living. Every human activity becomes a sacred, sanctified activity. It means just like you are worshipping in a temple or a church, you are also doing a secular activities. So there is no difference between a temple and an office, a church or your own home. I mean, the line of demarcation between the secular and spiritual disappears. The secular merges in the spiritual. Everything becomes spiritual. When we realize this Purushottama idea, it's a very famous concept in the 15th chapter. Then in the 18th verse, Yasmaksharam atitoham aksharada vicho uttamaha adosmi loke vedeja pradita Purushottamaha. This is a continuation. I am that absolute reality, Purushottama, which is present everywhere. 19th verse and 20th verse, the conclusion. Yo mameva asammudho janati Purushottamam ye sarvavid bhajadi mam sarvabhavena bharata. So, he Bharata asammudha yaha asammudha, a person who is free from delusion, who has understood this truth through spiritual discipline, by practicing spiritual disciplines, a person, an individual who has realized the supreme truth, he becomes the knower of everything, because he becomes the knower of the essence of all knowledge in that sense. So Shankaracharya has written a famous commentary on this, which I shall try to explain, because this is so very important, so I shall try to explain this one. He says, Yasmaksharam atitaha aham samsara maya vriksham ashutthakyam atikrantaka. So you can see we began, in the first verse, we began with the description of the samsara vriksha. That you will remember in the beginning of this first chapter. That is, Urdhamulam atashakam ashutham prahuraveyam chandamsi yasya parnane yastam vedasa vedavid. So the entire existence is compared to a tree, a banyan tree. But one difference, its roots are above and its trunk, its leaves, fruits, flowers are below. Because the tree emerges, it sprouts from its roots. That the source, the essence of everything is Brahman. So, Urdhamulam Kalataka Sukshmatvat, it is the cause, the causal dimension. You have to remember, one of our devotees who listened to this class online, there's a huge viewership online, he recently sent me a photo from a book, the picture of this tree standing on Sishasana. Tree standing on his head. So above roots, below trunk, leaves and so on. Somehow it is presented in some book and he sent it. So the idea is, and the point is, if you forget that you are emerging, you are actually emerging from your own roots, and if the trunk and leaves and branches declare the independence from the connection to the roots, they cannot survive. A branch cannot survive without roots. If the roots disappear, everything, the whole tree will disappear. So essentially the essence of the whole creation existence is Brahman. And from that Brahman, all these, the empirical universe, the empirical phenomenal universe, all jivas, different members of the animal kingdom, they all emerge. Ashutham prakuravayam, it's mentioned here. It won't last for tomorrow. The roots will remain, but everything else will disappear tomorrow. So Bhashikara says, Udhamulam karata sukshmatvat mahatva udham uchyadi. You see, so from that Atman, the entire creation comes into existence. Now similarly, if a person forgets and becomes a mudha, means somebody who is deluded into thinking that I am only this body, mind complex, nothing else. I don't have any spiritual dimension to my personality. I'm just a human body coming and going, living for 100 years and coming and going. That person is a deluded because he forgets his roots. It's just like a branch which disowns its roots, it will collapse. So that's the idea behind Yomameva Masammudo Janadi Purushottama. Somebody who is not deluded, who is wise, who remembers his connection with the roots, with his absolute reality, that person, Purushottam Janati, he understands this supreme reality. Sa sarvavid bhajadimam sarvabhavena bharata. Whatever that person does, it becomes an act of worship. So, how does a spiritually elevated person live in this world? For him, there is no line of demarcation between the secular and spiritual. Sarvabhavena. Whatever he does, if working in the kitchen, driving a car in the streets, and praying in the temple or a church or whatever may be, it's all the same. So spirituality pervading into every bit of our word, thought and action. Sarvavid bhajati mam, sarvabhavena bharata. That person is an elevated person, and for him, everything becomes divine. And in the previous commentary, the commentator says, samsara maya vriksham ashutthakim atikrantaka akam Aksharadabi samsara maya vriksha bija bhuda abija uttamaha. So that person transcends this this tree, because he identifies himself with Brahman, which is essence, the roots, everything. And for him, whole life is a spiritual journey. Life itself is a pilgrimage. Every word is like a mantra. Every thought is like a meditation. And every activity is an act of worship. And every moment is a journey in spiritual life. This is the whole purpose of the 15th chapter. To make us understand, on the one hand, our own, the nature of Brahman, which is our own true nature, and also to make us fully understand the fundamental imperfection, incompleteness, and impermanence of this material world, which is actually this samsara vriksha. That's why Bhashyakara says samsaya maya vriksha bijabhutad api. We transcend, we go beyond this karmic tentacle of action, its results, suffering and enjoyment, again action, again going back from life to life, death to death. We are born, living, suffering and enjoying, growing old, dying, again being reborn, continuing this journey. We transcend this samsara maya vriksha. We transcend this transmigratory cycle. This prison house of action, its results, sufferings and enjoyments, and again repetition of the same game when we realize our true nature with Brahman. That is Purushottama. So this is the essence of this 15th chapter. And before I conclude, I have to read some important announcements before Q&A. So there will be no Bhagavad Gita class on June 30th due to summer recess. That's why during the last class, sometimes many devotees are not able to come. So, but they should remember that there will be no class on June 30th due to summer recess. So our summer recess begins on June 26th. This to be understood. I mean, from Monday onwards will be summer recess. The next class, Bhagavad Gita class, will be on September 15th. But before September 15th, we have an important program, Labor Day Retreat. We have an important event. It is September 2nd, 3rd and 4th, Saturday, Sunday and Monday. September 2nd, 3rd and 4th, Saturday, Sunday and Monday. It will be in the new temple, Vivekananda Hall, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. The topic for discussion this year is Holy Mother Sri Sharada Devi, a spiritual ideal for the modern age. So this is the important event, next important retreat. Labor Day Retreat, Saturday, September 2nd, 3rd and 4th, Saturday to Monday, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. You can find information in our website. And then we are going to celebrate Guru Purnima, which is a very big event, and all of the devotees will gather in the new temple. The day devoted to honoring the spiritual teacher. So on Saturday, June 8, 10 a.m. So some invited Swamijis also will be present, and there will be talk and discussions on the importance of Guru Purnima. Please remember, July 8, Saturday, July 8, New Temple, July 8 and 10 a.m. to about 2 o'clock, there will be puja, flower offering, meditation, and of course lunch prasad. So please remember this important event, Guru Purnima, on July 8th, 10 a.m. up to about 2 o'clock. It will continue. You can get more information from our website. But please remember, there will be no class on Bhagavad Gita due to summer recess that begins on 26th of June. But one important information, our academic session, that is the foundational text of Indian philosophy online series, is hosted by Stanford University Students Association. It will continue throughout the summer recess. There will be no change the schedule. Every Sunday, 6 p.m. Pacific time. So thank you. Now, if you have any questions, you are most welcome to ask. Most welcome.
My question is why the tree is said to be inverted. Like why it's not said that it is straight.
Yeah, that's true. Because I know that there is a real purpose behind. Here, the transcendental dimension of existence is Brahman, which is also the source of everything. So it's a roots. When we descend from that, then we come to this universe. So we are descending from our true identity, Brahman, as trunks, branches, leaves, and so on. It's a very wonderful symbolism you find not only in the Bhagavad Gita. Originally, it comes from Krishna Yajurveda, in the Tattwamayananda. Urdhamulo atashako, esha shuddha sanatanaha. So in the Tattwamayananda, it is from Krishna Yajurveda. It is clearly stated. It's an ancient Vedic symbolism. One should remember the roots are permanent, absolutely real. Everything else comes and goes. That's the idea behind. It's an ancient symbolism. We are descending, so that's why all the branches and the trunk and everything, all these are presented below and branches above. That's the idea. Sorry, roots above. Urdha moolam. Moolam means roots. Urdha means above. And athashakam, the branches, the trunk, leaves, all below. That's the idea behind. Another important thing, you can find in the Ashwatha tree, frequently you find, if you go into India, it's a huge tree system, not a small plant. Frequently you find many of these trees, small, you can find roots are emerging on the top, you can find. That could be partly the reason. Okay, thank you.
Hello, Swamiji. My question is more general now in this 15th chapter. This sort of secret knowledge or this transcendental knowledge. How has Arjuna elevated himself over the chapters to get to this level?
Arjuna was not completely transformed listening to 15th chapter. In fact, Gita continues right up to 18th chapter. And only at the end of the 18th chapter, when Krishna asked this question, did you listen carefully to my discourse, my explanation? Then only Arjuna replied at that time, it was the end of 18th chapter, Nashto moha simidil labdha tat prasadar maya achyuda sidosmi gata sandeha karishe vachanam tava. What he says is, right now my delusions have gone, I have got back my memory, I shall act according to your instruction. That's the last statement that Arjuna makes in the Gita. That it was the very end of the 18th chapter. So Arjuna is, in a way, is not the most elevated soul. You have to remember, the Arjuna whom you find in Gita is not like the great spiritual characters of Mahabharata, like Vidura, Uddhava and others. Arjuna was, spiritually he was not an advanced person, but he had a number of other qualities. He was a man totally confused, and he was the kind of man who will act if he is given the right direction. So he did that. But remember, you see, idi guhyadamam shastram idamuktam mayanaka edad buddha buddhiman syar kudagutyascha bharata. I have taught you this guhyatamam. Here you can find secret knowledge, you will find in the translation. So, and also shastram, I wanted to make it less formal and less traditional. That's why I just made it very simple. Shastram actually means something that you cannot learn through direct perception and inference. Pratyaksha anumana atita means Shastram is something that you cannot fully understand just by human effort, by reading, and also by rigorous human intellectual effort. You can find even the great scientists who made great discoveries, you find they went 1 inch beyond their intellectual acumen. So a kind of intuition plays a very important role when you cross the border of empirical knowledge. So every physicist doesn't become an Einstein. Every physicist or scientist doesn't think why an apple happened to fall on his head. He would rather forget about it and eat that apple. But it takes a higher power, higher than the intellectual power. It's called an intuition, which goes beyond the first 2 principles of epistemology, in Western epistemology. In Indian epistemology, there are 6 or 10 actually. But in Western epistemology, most important are direct perception and inference. Inference also is based upon direct perception. You infer, use your reasoning power. That alone cannot take you to the highest intuitive knowledge. Somewhere there is 1 inch gap between inference, direct perception, and the discovery of a new truth, even in physics or chemistry and external world. So that's an area where a scientist, a hard-working first-rank scientist may not work. It needs a kind of higher human faculty. It's not entirely human. There is a part of it, there is spiritual faculty, which functions as intuition for scientists. And some geniuses are creative writers, painters, musicians. You find that extra intuitive power. That is why it is called Guhyatamam Shastram. You can find last verse. Iti Guhyatamam Shastram. Idam Uktam. I have taught to you, you heard from me, this divine secret truth. Okay. So, but that's the intention here. Because it requires a higher intuitive power to fully understand and grasp the true implication of Krishna's teachings. Arjuna could not fully grasp it at this stage, actually. Arjuna understood only later, into the 18th chapter. Lord Krishna himself says, Guhyataramaya vimursya etata seshena itaisithatha guru. I have taught you the supreme truth. Now you use your own reasoning power. You can come to this, you can find this Kachideta Sudam Partha. Please read the 72nd verse of the 18th chapter. 72nd verse, if you have got, there is a great, wonderful verse. 72nd of the 18th chapter. Kachideta Sudam Partha Toya Ekagrena Chedasa Kachidajnana Sammoha Pranastaha Te Dharanchaya. Arjuna, did you listen carefully to my description of the supreme truth? And are you now free from all your doubts? Did you listen very carefully? Your delusions have gone now? Krishna is asking this question. You remember? Could you see that? 72nd verse of the 18th chapter?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a very crucial verse in the Gita. So, Arjuna did not become a fully enlightened person when he listened to 15th chapter. But Arjuna was slowly ascending in his scale of, he was evolving, going to a higher and higher level of spiritual evolution. So when he reached the 72nd verse of the 18th chapter, he had developed the intuitive power to really understand the meaning of Krishna's teachings. And then he says, Nashto moha smridhi labdha, 73rd verse, Turprasadar mayachava. Now my memory is back and I'm free from all my delusions and doubts. Arjuna says. Krishna's question in 72nd verse, Arjuna's answer in 73rd of the 18th chapter. So this is important. That's why Guhya, that in this particular verse, in the 20th verse, you already mentioned that is Idi Guhyatamam Shastram. Guhyatama means actually most secret. Secret only in the sense that you cannot really understand it just by your own intellectual power and by reasoning power, either direct perception, pratyaksha or anumana, inference. You can see that especially when you read mystical books, spiritual books, as you evolve, you start reading more meaning into what you have read, what you've been reading for the last several years. As we evolve, our understanding of great spiritual truths also evolves. It becomes greater and greater. That's the idea behind. Okay, thank you. So please remember, we will have no class till September 15th, 7:30 as usual, and you can see our website for more information. Please remember, most of you are from nearby areas. We have Guru Purnima on July 8th, and more important, we have Labor Day retreat on September 2nd, 3rd and 4th, morning 10 to 11:30 a.m. It will be in the new temple, 2323 Valley Street, San Francisco. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.